Hey everybody, I'm Teryn Darling and you're listening to the Tatter-a-Fact Podcast at Girls Inc. Welcome. I'm glad to have you all here. And my gosh, another year down. Goodbye 2024. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are really happy to say goodbye 2024. But seriously, I hope everybody had a wonderful New Year's. And here's to a happy, fantastic, and prosperous 2025. You know, I know 2024 was tough for a lot of people, even 2023. I think since maybe COVID, the years have been rough for some people, tough for some people, challenging for some people. But, you know, I hope everybody is able to go into 2025 with hope. That's what I want for everybody. That's what I want for every single person for 2025, to go into 2025 with hope, hopes of prosperity, success, happiness, love, joy, and everything that you want. I have a good feeling about 2025. And many people that I've talked to over the last several months, because I've been on the road, feel the same way. So here's to 2025. Let's get at it. So today I got a guest with me. I got my girl Olivia. Hey, Olivia.
Hi.
Welcome to a Tatter-a-Fact.
Thank you.
I don't think you've been on here since you were pregnant.
Yeah. Feels different to be on this side.
It does?
Yeah.
You're always on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do all the controls and all that stuff and make sure everything runs cool. And so now you're on this side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you happy to be on this side?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you nervous?
A little.
A little?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're a little shy.
Yeah.
You're a little shy. But I have noticed, so you've been with me, Girls Inc., is it 5 years? Going on 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you are not nearly as shy as you were when you first came aboard.
Yeah, I think having a baby changes you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So for all of you that don't know, probably do know, but if those, I mean, we're always picking up new listeners on the podcast, but Olivia had her first baby boy. You want to tell everybody his name?
His name is Ivan.
Ivan.
He's super cute.
He is so cute. He's so happy. He's chubby. He's got a lot of hair.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, so yeah, I think even since having your baby, you've really, like come into your own with your voice and your, like your strength and your power. I've really seen that just since Ivan's been born. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of us at Girls Inc. have really kind of seen that. And you pick on me a lot more.
Yeah. It's fun.
See, I know. I know. But you would never admit that. Like, you know, like even a year ago, that would have made you blush, and you probably would have just had a heart attack if I called you out for picking on me. Now you're like, yeah, I totally pick on you. But anyway, so I think today's subject is really an important subject, and I think our listeners are going to love it because today's topic is on emotional EQ, right? EQ. So let me just explain EQ for a minute. So I think everybody is familiar with the term IQ, right? There's a great Seinfeld episode where George wants to know his IQ and Elaine cheats for him and he totally gets caught. Everybody knows I'm a Seinfeld fan. But anyway, everybody knows what IQ is. And that's a person's ability to solve problems. That's the definition. So a measure of intelligence and a person's ability to solve problems. So IQ stands for intelligent quotient. EQ is emotional quotient, and that's one's ability to understand and manage one's own emotions, right? To manage your own emotions. And then there's SQ, which is social quotient. And that's the ability to interact with others and or build relationships. So there are more quotients than that. That's what the Q stands for in IQ, EQ, SQ. The Q stands for quotient. And quotient means the amount of something, the degree or level of something. So whether you're talking IQ, EQ, or SQ, there's different degrees, right? There's a low IQ, average IQ, high IQ. You happen to be very high IQ, I would imagine, right? Because, I mean, what is that thing that you have again?
Phi Theta Kappa.
Yeah, that shows my low IQ. That my average IQ, that I can never remember that. But yeah, so you're somebody with a really high IQ. And have you ever done an IQ test?
No, I want to, but I don't know if I'll be disappointed. So.
Yeah, I've never done one either. Me and Kat have talked about doing one, but same reason. What if I'm like,
what if you think you're smarter than you really are?
Yeah. What if it comes back like only average? And I'm like, wow. Yeah. I mean, no, I've never done it. But so IQ, EQ, SQ. Intelligent quotient, emotional quotient, social quotient. There are more quotients than that. But those are like the three that are most observed and studied by professionals. So, and what we're going to talk about today is EQ, emotional quotient. And during my research on this topic, I found that many experts, like psychologists and doctors that study these topics, many of them believe that EQ is the most important of all the quotients, and that kind of surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. I would have thought IQ, your intelligence level, would be the most important of all the quotients. But on the contrary, I mean, it's probably debatable in that world of, psychology and science and doctors. I'm sure it's debatable, but many experts do believe that EQ is the most important of all. What do you think about that?
I mean, I agree with it, because you have to have some kind of emotional intelligence to kind of thrive in society.
Yeah.
You have to have empathy, because I feel like if you don't have emotional intelligence, then you're kind of just blowing through life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, what good is it to be really super smart if you can't develop or keep relationships?
Yeah.
You don't have empathy. You see yourself as a victim, and you don't take accountability for what's the sense of having a high IQ or a good level of intelligence if you're low in EQ?
Yeah, you're kind of isolated. You're by yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to talk about EQ, emotional quotient, because in the past 2 years, I have attracted several people to my space, whether it's my personal life, mostly it's been my business life, but also my personal space, with low EQ. And so let me tell you the definition of low EQ. So people with low EQ have a hard time managing and controlling their emotions. They have no self-awareness, and they don't recognize how their actions and words affect others or affect the different relationships and situations they are in. That's the broad meaning of people with low EQ. And of course, we're going to dive a lot deeper into that. And you know what they say, Olivia, like if you're out there dating, if you're dating and like your past or every romantic relationship you've had, you've attracted a partner that has negative qualities that affects you negatively. Maybe you're attracting a partner that yells at you a lot or threatens to leave the relationship, or they're just abusive or not healthy for you in some way. And that's the partner you keep attracting, relationship after relationship after relationship. They tell you, or, what a lot of experts say is, well, you need to take a look at your own self and what is it about yourself that's attracting that type of partner, that type of person, right? And so I'm always on the discovery of self-growth. I'm always trying to be a better person, trying to learn and grow, be happier and whatnot. So, the first person I attracted with low IQ, it's like, didn't really, strike me. Second person, not sure if it struck me or not, but definitely by the third and fourth person, I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? Right?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? So I had to take a look at myself. And first of all, why am I attracting this type of personality to me? I'm bringing it into my workspace. So if I'm bringing this or attracting this type of personality to my workspace, to Girls Inc., it's not just affecting me. It's affecting my team. You are a part of my team. And I know that these personality types that came into our business space, the Girls Inc. space, 100% affected you, right? And they affected us in a negative way. So I had to look at myself. Why am I attracting that? Not just why am I attracting that, but once I recognize that they have these qualities, which I didn't know EQ, I didn't know the term EQ yet, but I'm recognizing all these similar qualities between all of them. They all have the same qualities, and all these qualities are affecting me negatively, my team negatively, Kat negatively. Why am I attracting it? And second, why am I allowing them to stay in the space too long? Once I recognize they're not healthy for me, for my team, for Kat, for business, for Girls Inc., why am I allowing them to stay too long? So those were two things that I had to take a look at. I'm attracting this. Not only am I attracting it, once I recognize these qualities are not healthy, I'm taking way too long to tell them, you need to hit the road. Time to go, right? So on my path of self-discovery, I figured out with one reason is I'm an empath. I am. And people look at me and I think my tattoos and the way I am and the way I can get defensive. I can, defend those that I love the way I can get if pushed up against a wall, which is a badass. You've seen me be a badass with some volatile clients. But maybe what people don't know about me is that I am an empath to the point that it hurts me. It can end up hurting me. Yeah. So I had to really take a look at that, because we all have to be empathetic. That's a trait all humans should have. And if you don't have empathy, if you don't have that trait, then you're nothingness. What are you, right? You're not really human. We have to have empathy. But do you agree that someone can be too empathetic?
Yeah, I'm also an empath, but that's why it's really important to put boundaries.
You're right.
And learn how to manage people that kind of take advantage of your empathy.
Right. Exactly. I think for me, what it was that these particular people, although they had these really negative traits that affected not just me, but the space, like you could feel their energy and it just like oozed out and affected everybody. They also had days and moments where they were pretty awesome. And they were positive. And they were great to be around. And I think that's what I hung on to. That's what I chose to see and hang on to and believe I could see more of that. But in every single case, that's not what happened, right? I think in every single case, more and more and more of the low EQ qualities came out. And why do you think that is?
Why it kept coming out?
Yeah, like it almost got worse. Like the longer they were around, we kept them around. It's like the worse they got. That was my experience with all of them.
I think it was because there was no accountability. I can't say the word accountability.
Yeah.
Like us kind of like setting our boundary. Like, no, you're not going to act like that.
Because they got away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So they just continue doing it.
Right. So I'm wondering if they kind of, I guess that's kind of what I came up with, because I've been talking to Kat about this the last few days because I knew we were going to do this podcast. And it's like sometimes like, you beat yourself up and like, why did I let them stay around so long? When I saw this side to them, and then the EQ qualities, the low EQ qualities, and the longer they were welcomed in our space, the more often those low EQ qualities came out. And I think the more intense they were. So there's that whole saying, you teach people how to treat you. Right?
Yeah.
And I think so. I think you're right. It's like we didn't set boundaries and we just let them get away with it because, maybe we had a really bad day or they had a really bad day. We didn't say anything, but then the next, few days they were really, really great. Or maybe they were really creative in some way, or they were really great at what they did. And so we made excuses.
Yeah.
Right? We would rationalize and make excuses that would allow us to excuse their behavior, their toxic behavior, right?
And that's kind of like being, you were having empathy. You're putting yourself in their shoes in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could get so upset with each one of them when they were showcasing those really bad qualities, which we're gonna list them. Those really bad qualities that are toxic and unhealthy. It's unhealthy for them, and it's definitely toxic and unhealthy for everyone around them. But I would put up with it because they were talented, or there were many days where they weren't toxic, and I would and then you're like, for me it would be like, okay, they are awesome,
they're just having a bad day.
They're just having a bad day. And I would hang on to the good qualities of them, and then excuse the bad qualities. But here we are today talking about this. And there was 3 that came into the Girls Inc. space in the last 2 years. And all 3 are no longer with us, right? Gono, bye-bye. And I don't say that to be mean. I say it's like a relief. So I ended up getting to the point where I could no longer tolerate it. And then started a deep research on what are these traits? Why do people have this? What is this? And then what is, like I said, what is it about me that attracts us? What is it about me that keeps these people around for way too long and excuses that behavior? So it was a really great path of self-discovery and learning about my own self, as well as people that have these traits, and to understand people that have these traits, which is a level of empathy.
Yeah.
Right? Because I wanted to understand them. I don't want to be mad at them and have bitterness and be angry and all that stuff. And I'm not at any of them. I ended up probably being mad and frustrated with myself for not recognizing these behaviors sooner, or actually recognizing these behaviors, that they're recurrent, and not being proactive and doing something about it much sooner. So anyway, the reason I thought this podcast would be so important and why I wanted you to join is because there's a lot of listeners right now that have their own studios or will one day. If they don't have their own studios yet, they at least have clients. And so I wanted to talk about the traits so people can recognize these traits, because they can, people that are have really low IQ and have high degrees of these toxic traits can really be destructive, can really be toxic, and really affect you so deeply that you lose sleep, man. Right? So I wanted to talk about on a level of business, to help entrepreneurs, artists, studio owners out there recognize these traits. So when you're doing interviews or you're bringing artists on, you recognize these traits, and you don't make the mistake I made and let it go on and on and on and on to the point where, it's so much damage has been done.
Yeah.
And I just did a coaching session with someone, I do private coaching sessions, who's dealing with this right now with an artist in their studio. Yeah. So, yeah. So I think there's a lot of studio owners, business owners, and people in general that have people with low IQ in their lives, whether it's business or personal. People with family, your family can have low IQ. And the reason I wanted you to join is because, go ahead and tell them.
So I remember you came into the office and you told me that you were going into your journey. You're going into this journey of learning what emotional EQ is. And then I was doing the same thing. I was going through my own journey of studying emotional EQ. And that's because of my baby. Well, he's now 7 months. So the reason why I started that journey is because I was having a conversation with my siblings and my mom. And my mom told my sister, do you even love your boyfriend? It doesn't look like you love him. Like, you don't treat him like you love him. And then I think that kind of triggered my sister. And she told her, well, you never showed us how to love. So what do you know? Like, how do you know if I do or not? And then that hit my mom like kind of hard, and she started crying. And then she told us, like, I'm sorry. Like, I know I didn't show you guys love, but it's
Mhm.
because like I was never shown love. Like my mom never showed me how to love. And so that was a moment that I realized like, oh, what is this? Like why is it that like we continue the cycle?
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized it's generational trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and that I had to go on this journey to break it
Right.
and learn what emotional intelligence is, and like kind of go down that journey. So, because I don't want my son to go through that.
Yeah. And so now that that's pretty deep. And I want to
Yeah.
thank you for coming on here and being so vulnerable, and I can tell by your, I can see it in your
Yeah.
eyes. This is deep for you, and it's touching, and it's emotional. But I think, a lot of our listeners, they're artists, they're studio owners, they're beautypreneurs, but they're moms.
Mm-hmm.
They're moms. And so, and it is a cycle. And like, if your mom wasn't shown love and didn't grow up with that, then how is she going to know how to show you love unless she recognized that about herself and got into therapy or to learn how to show love? But your mom didn't have the tools or didn't have the insight, or for whatever reason, to recognize that, and raised you the way she was raised, not showing love.
Yeah. And like, she was a single mom, so I love her. And I mean, I understand why she was the way she was, because she was always stressed. She was working 2-3 jobs trying to support us.
Yeah.
So I understand now at this point in my life, because I'm going through this journey.
Yeah.
But I did have like a lot of like a lot of resentment towards her.
You did.
I did.
Yeah.
But then I went down this journey and I started to get more empathy towards her, especially now that I'm a mom, and now I understand her more.
Yeah. I think that comes with, as we get older, we understand that our parents did the best that they could with what they knew and what they had. And we have to forgive them, right? Or we carry that for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And then you continue the cycle.
Right. And I think a lot of single moms out there working more than one job, and so they're being the breadwinner, they're also protector. Maybe they feel they have to be tough.
Yeah.
With their children, because life's tough. They're out there working more than one job. They have to also be the protector. They've got to do this, that. They're doing everything on their own, and they're exhausted. And I think maybe a lot of single parents think just by taking care of you, paying the mortgage, putting food on the table, taking you roller skating, or, that's showing love, right? And they forget, or maybe it doesn't dawn on them, or they're just too tired, Olivia, to realize that we need them to say it. We need them to put their arms around us and hug us, and that. So yeah, I can relate. I had one parent that was extremely, I grew up in a 2-parent household, but I know my dad listens to this, so I don't want to get too deep, but he would admit there was a lot of arguing, and I had one parent, that showed a lot of affection, and was tough but also soft, and showed love and touch, and said I love you all the time. And one parent not so much. So yeah, and so I get it. So do you think that the way your mom raised you now, without showing love. Like you knew she loved you, right?
Yeah.
But she didn't show it. Do you think, now I'm not going to get too personal here, but I'm a little bit. Because you've had to work on some things on the last 5 years. You've been at Girl Sync, right? You and I have talked deep about it, right? Like developing your voice.
Yeah.
Right? Having a voice to where you can say no or say yes or give your opinion and, you know, develop your voice and have your personality blossom and shine and be you. I've seen that, you know, the last 5 years slowly develop, and especially since you've had your kid, you've had your boy, you know, your new relationship and your son. I've really seen it. And so do you think like the way your mom raised you, that's why maybe you didn't really have a voice and you kept quiet a lot and maybe didn't have strong boundaries and things like that?
Yeah.
That had something to do with it?
Yeah, it's because my mom was sort of always angry because of all the stress that she had. And in order for me to, like, I guess, feel safe, it was to people please.
To people please.
So I just try not to be any trouble to her because I didn't want to make her more stressed.
Well, what's really interesting is you would never in a million years know that you were raised by a mom who was always angry, because you never get angry. I mean, hardly, you know, which might not be healthy.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because anger is a natural emotion. It's just how you deal with anger, right? I mean, we get angry, of course, but we're always responsible for how we project that anger and who we project it on and how we deal, you know, how we, what am I trying to say? How we deal with anger, the emotion of anger, right? But I always say to you, do you ever get angry? But I know that you do. So I'm wondering if this path of studying EQ, emotional quotient, has that also helped you be able to identify when you're angry and express when you're angry?
Yeah, I'm learning how to self-regulate.
Self-regulate.
Yeah, because I was never taught that as a child. I was always told, you can't be sad. You can't cry. You can't be mad. You're just a kid. Right. But with this, I'm learning that you are supposed to let your kids feel those emotions. Right. And help them through them.
Help them through them. And help them navigate how to deal with them, right?
Yeah.
Right. So.
Because they're normal, or else you kind of shame them for having those feelings, and then you feel different.
Yeah. Like growing up, don't cry.
Yeah.
Don't cry over that. That's nothing to cry about, or right? Parents are always like, you know, like growing up, when I grew up, you know, with a house full of kids, it was just, you know, be seen, not heard. You know, they'd sit in front of you, in front of a TV, or in front of the TV on, and, you know, because my parents worked hard too. I mean, so, but it's a lot different nowadays. We're raising kids a lot different. We've learned a lot.
Yeah, and I think a lot has to do with the internet. Yeah. You have a lot of resources, which they didn't have back then.
No. So the internet is both. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's go. Let's talk about the traits, because I want people to recognize, and then you can segue this into, I'm going to start out giving the traits of low EQ. How to recognize when someone has low emotional quotient, so you can avoid it, because you really don't want to hire someone with low EQ. And there's different degrees of EQ, right? So there's high EQ, where you're really mature and you control your emotions and, you know, whatnot. And then there's extremely low EQ, where you have no control of your emotions. And then everything in between, just like someone's IQ, right? Intelligence level. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this list. But So now, I mean, we're hiring right now for 2 different positions. And so we are radar up. We're looking for, right? We want to make sure that we never hire someone again with low EQ, right?
Yeah.
Because we've experienced it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's list some traits that people can recognize. One trait of someone with low EQ is they have low empathy, right? Low empathy. So what that means, low empathy, is just they have a reduced ability to empathize and feel compassion for others, right? They can be insensitive to other people's feelings, and it's all about their feelings. It's almost like when you're talking, when you're in I always put it like this, when you're in, and I recognize this quickly nowadays, when you're just having a conversation with someone and you're telling them maybe something about your day or something you experienced, and they immediately turn the conversation around to them.
Yeah.
Constantly. Like, I don't know if that qualifies as low empathy, but I think that qualifies as low EQ because they're not listening to you. And they're just waiting for the chance to turn that conversation around about them. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting there for 5 minutes and listening to you. Maybe you just need someone to listen to you for a minute, But, so low empathy. So you definitely want to recognize employees or artists or anybody that you're going to hire. You don't want to hire someone with low empathy, right? Because they're going to be insensitive to your feelings, the other artists, employees that are there. They're going to be insensitive to their feelings. They're going to make everything all about them. And they're just not going to be able to empathize with what other people are going through or feelings. Like a little self-centered and all about them. So segue that over into raising a child.
Well, I don't think a lot of people realize that it's something that you have to teach.
You have to teach empathy to a child. And I didn't realize that. I thought that was something we're born with. Everybody knows I'm into crime documentaries and obsessed with like serial killers. So I do know there are some humans that I just felt were born without it. But a normal human's born with empathy.
Yeah. Like they have it, but you have to like build it.
You have to develop it.
You have to develop it.
So it's there, but the parent has to develop it.
Yeah. How
does a parent develop empathy?
With my research, it's through storytelling and through validating their emotions.
So your son is almost 7 months old. How do you start developing empathy with a 7-month-old?
I don't think I can right now.
You can't right now?
No, because I have to communicate with him.
Okay. And he's just at that goofy, giggly kind of stage. But he always has a big old goofy smile on his face. So once he can understand the English language and start talking to you, that's when you and parents should start developing empathy.
Yeah.
So when you say storytelling, what do you mean by storytelling?
Sort of like putting them in the shoes of a character, either like a book or like a character that feels emotions and starts going through a story. Okay, I got that. And as well, like if there's conflicts, then let's say the kid is arguing with another kid, you kind of put them in their shoes, like, oh, he's angry because this and this and this, and I know you're angry too. You kind of just have to like coach them through it.
Yeah. Well, I watched both my parents have a lot of empathy. I watched my dad, be a real giver growing up. And my mom, she would always, she was really good to the elderly people around the neighborhood. And, my gosh, if someone didn't have someplace to go for Thanksgiving. They certainly had a seat at our table. And she's still like that today. So my mom has a lot of empathy towards others. I've always seen her help others and give to others. That's one of her really strong traits. So I think
that's how you learned it then, because you learned it from your parents like that too, by them showing it.
And I was born into a house of dogs. My dad had 2 white huskies, when I was born. So we had I've never not had an animal. Mm-hmm. And I think when you have an animal, a dog, a cat, or whatever it is, what a great way to teach your child empathy with an animal, because you have to care for the animal, right? The animal's reliant on us to touch it softly, feed it, walk it, care for it, if it gets hurt, help it, so it's probably a great way for a child to learn empathy is through animals. Animals are just amazing and magical and wonderful.
Yeah,
they teach us humans so much. Okay, so low empathy. That's one trait to look for. Number 2, blaming others, right? So someone that has a low IQ is constantly blaming others, blaming everyone and everything else for the situation they're in or their circumstances. They just take no accountability. They're not willing to take accountability or responsibility for the consequences, like of their words or their actions or their own decisions. They just blame everyone else for everything that's happening to them. Wow. Can you imagine working with someone like that?
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. But, over the last couple of years, we've experienced that with different people. I have both professionally and in my personal life, and that's really hard when you're dealing with someone that just doesn't take accountability for nothing. And they blame you, they blame this, they blame that, they blame everything else, and they just don't take responsibility. I just don't. It's annoying. Mm-hmm. It's annoying. And I have spent a lot of time trying patiently to sit down and explain how their decision or their actions or their words brought this situation. But they're in such denial. They just take no accountability. That's someone with very low EQ.
Yeah.
Now, someone, maybe they don't have extremely low EQ, but they're not high EQ. Maybe they got a 50-50, right? Like sometimes they can take accountability, and then sometimes they're just like not going to, right? I guess it just depends on their mood or the situation, right? But it is hard to take responsibility and accountability for things that go wrong in your life or don't go the way that you want. Because then I think a lot of people feel like, well, if I take responsibility for that, then, I'm a loser. I'm my self-worth goes down or something like that. Maybe that's the mentality behind it.
And it's because a lot of them were taught that when they were kids.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to say, do you want to segue that into children?
Yeah.
And why? Because children do that a lot. They don't, like you could walk in the kitchen. My mom could walk into the kitchen, see my hand in that cookie jar, right? And say, Teryn, stop eating those cookies. Dinner's in an hour. I didn't get a cookie. I didn't take a cookie. And of course she caught me. It's like, so as kids, even though they're caught, they just stick to the story. They lie. They don't take accountability, right? So can you segue that into why kids are like that, and how do we raise children, teach our children not to be that?
Well, I think a lot has to do with the fear of not being loved. Because I feel like if you make, as a kid, if you make a mistake, you fear that your parents aren't going to love you.
Okay.
So you kind of have to like instill in them that just because you do mistakes, you're still going to be loved.
Yeah. And maybe the fear of punishment.
Yeah,
I think
that
because my dad was super strict. So if I did something wrong or something I wasn't supposed to do, my mom would kind of yell and maybe try to smack us as we ran by, but that was about it. You know, my mom she would yell. And, but my dad never didn't really, he'd raise his voice. You know, he would talk with authority, I guess. He would deepen his voice and talk with authority and never laid a hand on us. He did not believe in that. Where my mom would smack us, you know, I mean, not punch us or hurt us, but, you know, like a cuff, you know, whack up against the arm, or as you're running by her, she'd try to whack you one. She'd scream at you. But my dad never would try to hit us or anything. He didn't believe in that. But his voice would deepen. He would speak with authority, not really yell, but authority. And he would punish us by grounding and taking things away. And do you know who I feared most?
Your dad.
My dad. Yeah. I'd rather get swacked and yelled by my mom. I'd rather get caught doing something by my mom and take like, you know, a backhand cuff on the arm or whatnot. And, you know, have her yell at us than have to go sit down and have a lecture by my dad and be grounded by my dad. So I think for me, it was like the fear of punishment is why I would lie. And not take accountability, right? It would just lie, like stick to it, lie and stick to it. Don't change your story. So kids do that. So I think it's probably normal for kids.
There's also some kids that do it because they see it, like they see their parents doing it. Yeah. So they're learning from their parents.
They're learning from their parents. So how do you make a child not fear punishment? Because there has to be consequences for kids. If they're like, you're going to have punishments and consequences, you know, for your child, you have, I think you have to. So how are you going to teach him that if you break the rules or you do something you're not supposed to do, yes, there's going to be consequences, but they can't, but not to fear it. Can you teach that your kid that?
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
right?
I'm going to do research on that because I haven't really looked into that.
Yeah. Or maybe not fear, but dread.
Yeah, because I think you're still going to fear, like you're still going to like dread it.
Yeah. But so I think that's just like innate in kids.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's just innate in kids that they just lie.
It's like, I don't want to get punished.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So number 3, a sign of low EQ is they're too self-focused. So they're very self-focused. So, and when someone is too self-focused, they have a very hard time accepting criticism. Like, God forbid you criticize or critique anything that they've produced or have done. And when they're too self-focused, I think they always have to be right. They have this thing that they rather be right than happy, right? And we have experienced that. And we work as a team, right? Like, you know, we pivoted at Girls Inc. and now basically, you know, we're all online, which is like awesome. And so we're basically, you know, so we have our store, we have our products, we have the OMG pigments, and we have 2 new amazing products coming, you know, in the next few months. And we have to market those products. We have to market the store. We have to market the online courses that we do. So we sit around and we talk about these products. We market them. You create graphics. I create ideas. We come up with names. We come up with strategies. And if your graphic is not quite, you know, cutting the cheese, I have to be able to tell you. We have to be able to tell you. without you getting all like your panties all in a bunch. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which you take criticism very well. You're definitely not somebody that has a hard time accepting criticism. You always show your computer, hey, Teryn, do you guys like this? Do you like that color? Do you think this should be? Do you know? But we have worked with people that do not take criticism well at all. We cannot critique something that they produced or made, or they take it so personally, it really upsets them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've actually incorporated that into our interview process. How do you take criticism?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if you produce a graphic or you produce something and you show it to us? Because we make a lot of team decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all look at it. We all got to love it. So in our new hires, in our interview processes, how do you take criticism well? And if they say yes, we go one step further. So if you produced a graphic or came up with an idea and the entire team was like, I don't really like that. I think we need to go in another direction. It's not going to hurt your feelings. You don't take it personally. So we've really been asking that in their interviews. And I think it's been really helpful.
Yeah.
So I think that's really smart to do, to incorporate that in your interviews. And like I said, we've definitely experienced people that always have to be right. Like it just feels too good to be right. They'd rather be right than be happy. They'll argue they just have to be right. You know? It's just,
It's hard to work with that.
Yeah. Dr. Phil talks about that all the time. You'd rather be right than happy. And and I'd rather be happy than, well, I want to be both. I want to be right and I want to be happy. But I don't always have to be right. That's why I have you. You're smarter than me in so many areas. That's why I put together a team where I'm weak, I put really super smart people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And because I'm not intimidated by that. It's like, and I put people around me that are not going to tell me yes just to appease me, or they don't have the balls to say no. Right? You had to work on that.
Yeah.
Right?
People pleasing.
People pleasing. Yeah. And I remember you and I have this conversation. I told you like you saying yes to me when you really want to say no, it doesn't help me. It hurts me. Hurts Girls Inc. It hurts our mission. And I know, Olivia, you love me, and I know you love Girls Inc. And it was just a matter of you developing, those skills to say no, right?
Yeah.
Not being like I think maybe you had to have you had to grow to trust me and Kat and everybody at Girls Inc. to know if you said no, or if you didn't say yes to something, or if you, we were still going to love you.
Yeah.
We weren't going to get mad. It's not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That also comes from my corporate jobs. I kind of had trauma from there.
You had trauma from the corporate world?
Yeah.
Oh, honey, I know. It's what took you 5 years to lose all that trauma.
Yeah.
You probably should have gone into deep therapy. We've been your therapy.
Yeah.
I know the corporate world can do that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have someone else that has been with us 2 years who came from deep corporate, and she shares a lot of those traumas with you. So that's really crazy. But now you're really developed. You're really developed. Like I said, you pick on me. You developed your voice. Everybody likes to pick on me.
Yeah.
I know.
A cat too.
Cat likes to pick on me too. Even Cat loves when you pick on me. But all right. Okay, so that's number 3, too self-focused. So you don't want someone on your team or hiring ours, or an employee that's too self-focused and can't take criticism and always have to be right. That's not teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want someone like that on your team. Too hard. Okay, so number 4, they lack self-reflection. So what that means, lack self-reflection. They cannot see or recognize their own behavior. They cannot see that they're being pissy, snatchy, snotty, that They can't see that. Which results in poor communication, right? And creates difficulty resolving conflicts. And we experience that. I've experienced that in quite a few people in the last 2 years, that they just had no insight, no self-reflection. They didn't see that they were having like meltdowns over nothing. They would respond with a really snappy tone, and a tone that made you feel uncomfortable. They didn't realize their mood and tone could change the energy of the entire workspace and everybody in that room. They didn't see that. Or if they did, they didn't care. But I think they didn't see it. What do you think?
Yeah, they didn't see it because they don't, like you said, they didn't have any self-reflection.
They didn't have any self-reflection. So that is a really, really negative trait when you're looking to hire an artist or someone to work for you on your team, is someone that lacks self-reflection or insight. Because they don't see that. And so, and what that does is it produces people that will snap at you, come in all moody, and they just stay in that mood all day, and then it doesn't just create difficulty in communication and resolving situations. It almost like stops it, because who wants to talk to someone like that? Because every time you try to talk to them, they're snappy. And they're shutting you down. And I put up with that for quite some time with several people, and I had to deal with that. I had to deal with that. I felt so guilty that I allowed a couple of different people to stay on board that was doing that, because it affected you. It affected everybody. Do you know? And I remember just being like, so like down on myself, like so ashamed of myself for not recognizing it. How can you not recognize it? We all recognized it. Just so ashamed of myself for letting it go on. And like I said earlier in the podcast, I let it go on because there were good days. And I think that's what I hung on to.
Yeah.
You know?
And some of them are truly good people.
Yeah.
They just,
yeah. And exactly. And thank you for making that point. We're talking about traits of low IQ. This does not mean they're not good people. And a couple of the people that we experienced with these traits that have low EQ were good humans, ethical and good humans. They just happen to have low EQ, which we now know goes back to childhood. And in some cases, we understand.
Yeah.
Because we understand some of the childhoods of, some of the people we were around. So we have empathy for them. But that doesn't mean they could stay.
Yeah.
Right?
They have to go on their own self-discovery journey.
Yeah. And we had to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And let them go with love. Right? And I think that's what we did. We didn't let them go angry or bitterly. Maybe on their part, there was some anger or some bitterness or whatnot, but that's because of their low EQ. But we let them go with love and kindness and grace and hoping they go on their own discovery and address these things. But sometimes people never recognize these things about themselves and stay in that low EQ space
really sad.
Their whole life. Yeah. So, but hopefully, the people that we have met and come across our path don't, because they deserve better for themselves. I want more for them. They deserve it. Okay, so lack of self-reflection, can't see or recognize their behavior. So take that back to raising a kid.
So, because I've seen like a lot of like for example, my cousins when they're parenting their kids, they always whenever like their kid is going to start having a tantrum, they always want to stop it. They don't want to like they don't want it to like go any further than like, okay, you're not feeling anger, stop. But the thing is that like you have to let them feel the anger. You have to let them feel the frustration, and help them understand that that's a natural feeling, that we all feel angry, we all feel frustrated. It's just your behavior.
Okay, so a lot of people listening right now, they're wondering, like I'm wondering, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper on you, Olivia. So are you saying if your child doesn't get his way or her way for whatever reason, they're mad, and they're pulling off a full-on tantrum, because we've all seen kids have tantrums in stores, right? I had someone in my family growing up that had tantrums. You just let the kid have a tantrum? It's okay for the kid to have a tantrum?
Yep. You just have to coach them through it. Coach them through their emotion of why they're feeling the way they're feeling.
What if they're just screaming at the top of their lungs and they're pounding and kicking the floor just because you said, no, you can't go outside. You have to do their homework. You're supposed to let them have that tantrum.
Well, have that emotion, but then you have to teach them that behavior is not okay.
Okay.
So it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to scream.
Okay.
You have to separate the emotion from the behavior.
Gotcha. That's probably a difficult task.
Yeah, which I will let you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Because I can't. That's just from the research that I've read.
Yeah. Probably, and it probably requires a lot of patience from the parent, right?
And also you have to like have your own self-reflection as well. You have to have a lot of patience, and you have to have like a higher emotional EQ. Yeah.
But if a kid's having a tantrum, is there something in the way they've already been raised or experienced in the home that has allowed them to use? Because if a kid's having a tantrum, it's usually to try to get their way, right? To break down the parent or persuade the parent to let them have their way. So is it something they've already learned?
Yeah, it could be.
It could be.
That they've learned it from other kids or even from their own parents, that they see their parent getting angry and then start screaming.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of psychologists, and I keep mentioning Dr. Phil, I'm such a dork, but I love Dr. Phil. But he would talk about that a lot, like parents, if your child witnesses like his parents screaming at each other, or one parent like raging, that can really change the child and change who that child was born to be. And I remember one episode when he was saying that, and it really hit me, because I grew up, with parents that didn't get along, and probably should have parted ways long before they did. But I think a lot of parents try to stay together and make it work for the children. And don't do it on purpose. No one would hurt their children on purpose or affect them in a negative way on purpose, but I just don't realize that, when children watch or experience their parents screaming and fighting, it profoundly affects you, right? I can remember feeling, those emotions, when my parents would fight. Yeah. And I ended up with anger issues, like in my 20s, to be quite honest with you. I was really immature through my 20s, and in my relationships, and I went into intensive therapy to be able to regulate my emotions and my anger, because I knew it wasn't right
Mm-hmm.
to act out the way I was acting out when I got angry, right? Screaming, yelling, pounding things, pounding a wall as I walked by a wall, those are all learned behaviors. And, but I also I don't know what it was about me, Olivia, but I also knew I didn't want to be that way. I wanted better for myself, and I didn't want to be that way. And so, I got into therapy. I was in therapy all through my 20s to learn how to regulate my emotions, because I'm a really emotional person all the way around when it comes to happiness and passion and joy and anger, anxiety, fear. I'm like full of emotion, and my emotions are intense. I think that's just me. So I had to learn to regulate a lot of different emotions in order to have a good life. And if I didn't learn to regulate those emotions and navigate those emotions, I don't know if I would have ended up where I am today and having a good life. Do you know?
Yeah, that's why it's important to have to work on it.
Yeah.
So you can thrive and be successful.
Yeah. And it's hard to admit these things about yourself, especially when you're in the midst of it. Now I can talk about it. I'm not a perfect person, and I still deal with these emotions, but I have a lot of coping skills now and tools, and I'm really good at regulating, and a completely different person today than I was, in my 20s. And it's not hard for me to talk about it today. But in my 20s, when I'm in the midst of it and I can't regulate those emotions, and I'm having outbursts and meltdowns, and I'm anger, and it's really hard to admit that about yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you don't want to admit that yourself. You just want to deflect and just carry on. But I knew it wasn't healthy for me.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want to be that. And I didn't want to leave that mark on people. That's what really made me want to change. Like when people experienced me, I wanted them to walk away from me feeling good that they met me, and good that they became my friend, or good that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Delete her contact number. All right. So lack of self-reflection. Number 5, poor coping skills. Poor coping skills. Meaning they're quick-tempered, which is what we just talked about, which I was in my 20s. They're often very condescending. I was never really that condescending, but I was quick-tempered when I was young. And having outbursts or meltdowns, becoming extremely emotional. That was definitely me, especially in romantic relationships. Not really with friendships. Like in my friendships, I never had meltdowns or outbursts. I've never had a fight with a friend. They never really seen that side of me. They see that I'm a little spicy and, I'm passionate and whatnot. But in my romantic relationships, oh yeah, I'd have outbursts and meltdowns, and it was terrible. I was so immature. I was so terrible, and I was quick-tempered. And in situations, but never with my friends. And I don't know why. I don't know why I could control and navigate and regulate my emotions with my friendships. But outside of my friendships, I had a very difficult time regulating and navigating emotions with family members and romantic partners.
Maybe because you had like deeper relationships with them.
Maybe. It could be. Because I'm really close to my friends. And those friends that I'm talking about are my friends today. I have friends that have been my friends for, since, my best friend, we met when we were 4 years old. And, we talk all the time, and we're so close. And, like growing all my friends out here, there's like 10 of us, and we've all been friends. Oh my God. Since my early 20s, So yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, you should study that.
Yeah. That'll be my next one.
Why do you not want your friends to experience that side of you? Or why do your friends not bring that out in you?
Yeah.
But is that an excuse? Does your family bring that out in you, or is that just an excuse? Do romantic partners bring that? Oh, they bring that out in me. That's just an excuse, I think.
Or maybe it's like a face, like a mask.
I don't know.
Like a mask with your friends where you don't want them to see that side of you.
No, it wasn't a mask. I just don't.
You just don't. They don't bring it out of you.
No. But some of my family could, and certainly my romantic one, but not Kat. Like me and Kat just, celebrated 20 years, and me and Kat don't have that. By the time I met Kat, I had several romantic relationships, and I had already gone through 8 years of therapy. So by the time I met Kat, I was already healing. I already had a deeper understanding of myself and why I acted out like that, and of my emotions. And I was already aware and evolved and healing. I wasn't perfect, but Kat was more mature than me when we met. She's a little bit older than me, and she was more mature with me. And well, Kat, her emotions are very regulated, and she's very evolved that way. So I think already being on a path of healing and working on that for 8 years, heightened self-awareness, and then going into a relationship with Kat and not wanting her to ever experience that side of me, because I fell deeply in love, and I wanted her to be proud of me and glad that she chose me. And then just her being her, so evolved, I think it just really helped me heal even further and develop even quicker than I would have if I hadn't met her. Yeah, because Kat and I don't fight.
And that's because she has an emotional EQ, like a higher. Maybe that's why, because your friends have higher emotional EQs and your family and partners didn't.
That could be. I don't know. Yeah. It's a lot to think about. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. Okay, so just a couple more.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap this up. So poor coping skills. Well, let me ask you. So how do you teach a kid? So poor coping skills, right? Quick-tempered, they can be condescending and have outbursts, meltdowns when they don't get their way, extremely emotional, right? So how do you bring that back to raising a kid so they don't end up like me in their 20s, quick-tempered and,
Well, one big thing is like leading by example. Yeah. So if you as a parent are feeling frustrated or angry, you can't have those outbursts in front of your kid.
Yeah.
And you have to like state it like, yes, I'm angry, but it's okay.
Yeah.
That way your kid can learn that from you.
Right.
As well as like once you see because also like you have to have empathy also when you're like coaching your kids through the tantrum, because you have to realize what emotion they're feeling.
Right.
So if they're feeling frustrated, there are ways that you can stop the tantrum before it even happens.
Yeah. What's interesting is I grew up in a big Irish family, and big family on both sides. My mom's side and my dad's side, big families. And on both sides of the family, there's tempers. And some have quick tempers. Like it's just brewing right there, man, right on the collar, brewing. And then some didn't have tempers. They could get mad, but they didn't have quick tempers. So I grew up with that. Big families that were boisterous and loud. I mean, wonderful human beings, though. Don't get me wrong. And loving and kind, but some were quick tempered, yeah. And 100%, and when I go back east, I was just back east, and we'll talk about it. We'll sit around the table and talk about like growing up and the quick tempers some of the adults had, and how it affected like us kids, me and my cousins and whatnot. So it's good to have those conversations. And I'll tell you what, right now, like I can recognize someone who's got a quick temper off the bat, because I don't have a quick temper. I can get angry and I can back someone up if I'm pushed up against a wall. but I don't have a quick temper. Do you know what I mean? I don't have a quick trigger. Like I'm not easily triggered and quick tempered anymore. But I used to be. But I can recognize that in someone else. Pretty quick and pretty. Yeah, I recognize that in someone else if they're quick tempered, and I don't want anybody quick tempered around me anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's like you're always walking on eggshells when someone's quick tempered or triggered very, very easily. So I don't think that's makes a good teammate or someone to have on your staff or in your studio. You don't want to be walking around eggshells. Okay, number 6, hold on to grudges.
That one's hard.
Yeah, but I mean, they never really forgive or let go of things, right? They bring it up often, throw it in your face. I mean, and I have someone in my family that I've got more than one person in my family. I mean, 2 that I can think of that constantly do that, constantly hang on to the past and bring up things from the past that hurt them or upset them or made them angry, and they have never let it go. You're talking 20 years later, 30 years later, they still bring it up. And I can see where how not letting it go and hanging on to it has damaged them and hurt them. So, and thank goodness, Olivia, thank goodness, I don't hang on to grudges. Like, I can forgive I may not forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not make the same mistake twice. But I do forgive. I do forgive. I don't hang on to grudges. I've never hung on to a grudge and stayed bitter and keep bringing up, like I said, I don't forget. And I will not make the same mistake twice at this point in my life. But I don't hang on to grudges and anger and bitterness. And I do let things go with love and grace. I don't want to carry it.
Because I think like it's important to realize that you're just hurting yourself by doing that.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people think by forgiving the person and letting it go, you're saying that, well, it's okay they treated me that way. No, that's not what you're saying. You're really doing it for yourself so you don't carry that negative emotion around with you because it's negative. Mm-hmm. And it just will continue to eat at you and destroy you in some way, be toxic to you in some way. So you have to find a way to let it go. Yeah. Just let it go. Right? Easily offended, number 7, right? Easily offended. So people that have low EQ, they're easily offended. And this is, I think, is because they're insecure about their own ideas or themselves, right? They got fragile egos.
Yeah.
So they're easily offended. Like, I am not easily offended. If I was easily offended, I would not be this far in my career. My goodness. You can't be easily offended and be successful in business, I think. Because you're going to drive a lot of people away from you, right? Especially if you want to do collaborations and work with people and stuff like that. You can't be easily offended because, especially in the PMU industry, we're in an industry with lots of different personalities, philosophies, beliefs, different ways of doing things. And if you have a fragile ego and you're easily offended, you're going to be mad at a lot of people or offended at a lot, a lot. You're going to be offended most of the time. And so, you just can't take things too personally and not be easily offended. And I think you're going to be a much happier person, and you're going to be much more successful if you just, they say, stop taking things personally and watch how happy you become.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I think people that are easily offended also consume excessive news and social media. Their consumption of news and social media is excessive. I find that commonality. Mm-hmm. So I think it's healthy to turn off the news, get off social media, take breaks from social media, Don't compare yourself to others. You get a lot happier, right? So I'm somebody that I don't want to be ignorant. I want to know what's going on in the world, but the news is so depressing and it affects me so negative that I don't watch a lot of news, and I certainly don't peruse social media. I don't do a lot of social media consumption. I just don't anymore because it wasn't healthy for me. I did find myself comparing myself to others, and I think that's kind of normal. So we have to just self-check yourself that way, and take breaks from social media. Don't compare yourself to others. Turn off the news if you find it's affecting you and whatnot, So easily offended, low IQ. And the last trait, there's more traits in this, but this is all we're going to get through, is comfortable being the victim. They are comfortable being the victim. And one person in particular that came into my life in the last 2 years, 2 people actually, that was them. I mean, they were the victim. They constantly perceived themselves as being wronged or unfairly treated, even when they weren't, when it wasn't warranted or justified feeling that way. And they just had the poor me syndrome. And they spoke about it a lot. And I find they post about it a lot because they want the sympathy or the pity. So they have I think they call it the poor me syndrome, right? And that's really unhealthy for a person to take on that victim role and to get comfortable in it. And even if you've been a victim, right? Because there's legit people out there that have been victimized and victims, and 100%. I think most of us in some way or another, some degree, some much worse than others, have been victimized. But even those people that have been victims of either bullying or crime, traumatic stuff, it's not healthy for them to stay in that victim role and perceive themselves as a victim. They have to find the strength, the courage, the tools, the support team to help them work through the trauma and get to the other side to where they're not a victim, they're triumphant, right? Maybe they were victimized, but now they're triumphant. And for every person, that journey is different. The length of the journey and what that looks like is different.
And it's a hard journey.
It's a very difficult journey.
Yeah.
With that said, there are some people, and I've come across them, and 2 come to mind, that stay. They have just planted and rooted themselves in that victim role, and everything comes back to them being a victim. And they use that as an excuse, I think, for their outbursts, for their anger, for their mistreatment of others. Sometimes they're good manipulators, right? So I've seen, so some people can just stay in that victim role because why do you think that? Because it works for them somehow?
Yeah, or because they're scared of going through the therapy
and the work that it takes to get on the other side, because you have to deal with the trauma.
Yeah.
To not be a victim, you have to work through the trauma, and that can be painful.
Yeah, it's harder. It's easier to ignore it.
It's easier to ignore it. But I feel empathy for people that stay in the victim role because they're self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
It may be more comfortable for them. I think they think it's more comfortable for them. But by staying in that victim role, I think they destroy relationships. And they self-sabotage a lot of opportunity. And so I think I think it hurts them more. I think it's harder for them to stay in that role. But I think somehow the mind tricks them that it's easier to stay in that role and it works for them and they're safer in that role, when it's not. Yeah.
But because they've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. And I want to sit down and counsel people like that. So that there was a couple of people I really wanted to like sit down and talk to, but I'm not a professional. They won't hear you anyway. And I think it just angers people.
Yeah.
So I've had to walk away.
They have to have their own realization and kind of go through the journey themselves.
Yeah. Because I have tried in the past to have some conversations to bring a little insight in a very kind, loving way. But they don't always take it in a kind, loving way. In the moment, they do, or they seem to, and it seems like you've had a really healthy conversation and you hug, but then something happens.
It's their ego.
Overnight, they think about the conversation.
Yeah.
They come back the next day or 2 days later, and then they're angry at you. Yeah. But, no one wants to work with someone that is emotionally unhinged and can't control their emotions and at any time can have emotional outbursts towards you. No one wants to work with someone like that. I certainly don't. I've had my experiences. I've had to go through them. And my radar is up and alert. We talk about it now, as a team. And it's like I want to go through the rest of my career and not attract anyone like that anymore, not get involved with someone like that anymore, because the stress that it brought me it was just devastating. It brought me so much stress and anxiety and worry, and it made me distraught. It wore me down. It gave me sleepless nights. I would have conversations with myself, like practicing how can I talk to them about this, and I'm supposed to be like, evolved and strong. But with people like that, they kind of scare you a little bit because, you don't want to have those emotions erupt towards you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to deal with those emotions at this point in my life. You get to a certain point in your life, in your career, and you just want peace, love, and joy.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
And there's no reason why you should be dealing with those emotions.
Yeah.
We're all adults.
And that's the thing. We don't have to. We no longer have to. But I think you have to recognize these traits. So we just gave 8 traits of low IQ. So I'm going to list them really quick. Low empathy, blaming others, too self-focused, lack of self-reflection, poor coping skills, hold on to grudges, easily offended, comfortable being the victim. Those are 8 traits of someone that has low EQ, emotional quotient. And if the degree of those traits are low enough, then you're going to have toxicity in your workplace. You're going to have confrontations. You're going to have stress. You're going to have strife and lots of discomfort. Right?
Yeah.
Now, some people, myself included, can have some of these traits, but low degrees.
Yeah. And you're you know about it.
I know about it. I'm self-aware. I'm self-aware. And when they creep up, I'm aware they're creeping up. And I have really good coping skills now to regulate them and deal with them, or have an adult mature conversation. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I think this was great.
Yeah, it was.
So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to say goodbye. But you're raising your first son. He's almost 7 months old. And we just talked about emotional IQ and emotional development. So I'm gonna ask you if there's. So I know we have a lot of moms listening.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a message you want to leave or give to moms with what you're learning, what you're experiencing, to make sure, like, your child maybe hopefully doesn't have to deal with some of these emotions, traits that we've had to deal with, and maybe some of our listeners have had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something you want to say?
Yeah, well, it's a hard journey, and it's just having a lot of patience. And I know that's really hard. I mean, I only have a 7-month-old, so I haven't experienced the tantrums myself, so I can just imagine how hard it is. And
yeah,
I don't know.
It could be coming though.
I know.
It could be coming.
I know. But I recommend all moms to do your research.
What book are you reading? Is it where can moms, if someone listening right now is like, maybe they're not a patient person, because you're very patient.
Yeah.
Maybe someone listening right now is not a patient person. Because that's normal. A lot of people are not patient. Or maybe they are patient. Maybe they have a kid that some of this is like, oh my gosh, it's hitting home. Like, they're seeing some of this in their own children. Are there some resources that you can recommend? Is there a particular book that you're reading?
Yeah. So, because the first step would be analyzing your own childhood and realizing if you went through a lot of this that we talked about. Mm-hmm. And I believe the book is called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I'll put it in the description and give you a link to the book. But it's a really good book because it helps you understand your childhood and know if your parent was emotionally immature or had a low EQ. Mm-hmm. And to realize that, like, you kind of like heal it.
So that book, you've brought that book up a lot at work. So that book probably helps you have better insight and understand why you are the way you are.
Yes.
Because I think we all have things about ourselves that we don't like about ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can love ourselves. Like, I love myself, right? You love yourself. But I have things about myself that are innate in me that I don't like, that I have to be aware of, that I don't want to come out, and I have to control and navigate and whatnot. And you do as well, right? So probably that book helps you recognize those things about yourself, but still allows you to love yourself. Because I think we have to be able to recognize the things we don't like about ourselves, yet we still love ourselves. We're still good people, and we're still able to love ourselves and value and feel self-worth and value. Yet we can say, I've got this trait that's not healthy, and this trait that's not healthy, and this trait that's not healthy, but I'm still a great human and I still love myself. So does that book help you to do that?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people recognize things they don't like about themselves, and then that can snowball into them not liking themselves, period, or feeling they're not a good person.
Yep.
Right? And that's so far from the truth. It's all just, we're all here to be better tomorrow than we were today. We're all here on it. I believe self-discovery and this journey of becoming a better person. and learning and growing always, every day of your life. So I think this podcast was great, Olivia. So thank you for sitting down and doing this with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It was a different type of podcast. I mean, it wasn't really quite like a motivational one. A little bit motivational. Hopefully it motivated people. But, you know, what I wanted to do really was have people understand what low EQ was and avoid the pitfalls and mistakes that I have made. Hiring people, you know, what to look for. Because, you know, if I can help people avoid some of the things that I have done that have ended up hurting me or hurting my company, you know, that's my mission and that's my place in the industry here on in. I've always done that. But now that I don't have a studio life, I have a lot more time to really dig deep and to mentor and talk about the mistakes I made and hopefully help other artists avoid those mistakes. I always want to be open and transparent and vulnerable with not just my listeners, but the industry period, you know, and that can be a scary thing. I'm always a little nervous doing that, but I think it's the only way to be. It's the only way for me to be. Yeah, I don't know any other way. And you were really vulnerable today, and you were awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everybody, that wraps it up for this episode of A Tatter-a-Fact. So thank you so much for hanging out with me and Olivia today, and we will see you on the next Tatter-a-Fact.